I think this is a very interesting topic, and I'm actually I'm happy you've asked this, because I think that this is something that is not discussed a lot. I think it's something that, you're right, the non-Muslims, they discuss it a lot, right? It's massive amounts of stuff on self-love and all this kind of stuff. From an Islamic perspective, I don't think in our everyday kind of discussions, it hardly ever comes up. Self-love, a lot of it is to do with the way we our paradigms are built when it comes to arrogance and all those kind of things that are linked to things like self-esteem, self-worth, all this stuff. I think generally what we need to do is we need to assess where we are with different things. And then based on those, I would say that we need to make sure that we are balanced individuals. Like generally that's my approach. When it comes to strength and stuff, it's good. You build on your strengths, you do more of what you're good at. If there's something you're not good at and you're below the minimum threshold, a weakness, then you should definitely work on that. Like generally people say you shouldn't work on your weaknesses because they're always going to be weak and this and that. I don't believe that fully. I think, for example, let's say that you're not fasting like full Ramadan, for example. Like if you're below the mandatory threshold, then I don't think, oh yeah, it's just a weakness, don't focus on it. I actually believe that you should focus on it and you should try to raise the game and all those kind of things. Of course, there's things that you're naturally more good at, and therefore you doing those things makes a lot of sense. I think with self-love, self-care, self-esteem, self-worth, all of these kind of things, again, I think it's a case of looking at where you are, because there are truly some individuals out there that are like Muslim, non-Muslim, whatever. They do have a lot of self-care. They do care about their own opinions and themselves and all this stuff. And it's just on a very dangerous level. So for an individual like that, I'll be like, look, self-care, self-worth, throw it out the window. Like what you need is actually to respect other people and for you to, give other people the time and think of people in a good way and treat them in a good way. So this is someone who's got too much self-worth, too much arrogance, all this stuff. So this is the general advice I would give to someone like that. But then when you've got someone who's completely on the other side, where, they have very low self-esteem, they have very low confidence, they have very this, very that, with that person, it's like, no, you need to raise the game. Like you need to go to a whole next level of self-care and all this stuff. So I think it really depends where you sit in and around this stuff. Also, what I would say is that self-worth, self-esteem, all this stuff, from a Quranic perspective, like whenever I read different ayahs in the Quran, especially to do with entering the hellfire, when there are people who constantly in the Quran, it keeps talking about people who are saying to their leaders and to their chiefs and everyone else, like, you guys got us into Jahannam. That's what they're saying, basically. That, of course, it's their own fault as well, but they're kind of saying that we followed you in here. Like, we basically came with you. We did what you said and all this kind of stuff. And I think that a lot of the reason why people just follow others is because they don't have the confidence. They don't have the self-worth. They don't have the self-esteem. They don't have the right levels of these things for them to actually resist, right? And it's natural as human beings, we're used to being in a social setting, so it's hard to stand up and resist and all this kind of stuff. So I'm not saying that in a judgmental way, but I just mean that it's a very, very serious thing, right? And then when you enter a relationship with someone else and there's no self-esteem for you, there's no self-worth, what it does sometimes is actually really is detrimental to the relationship, because just like someone doesn't believe that they're worth anything, to them, they will always have the paradigm of their partner giving them the same thing as well, like just fulfilling the same paradigm of not feeling worthy and not feeling, loved and all this stuff. So when the time comes, like an argument happens, then people will default to their paradigm. Like an argument happens, right? And someone like husband and wife argue, and then the wife will go back to her typical paradigm of like, I'm not worthy, or it's my fault, or I'm not worthy of love, or no one cares about me. Like all these kind of things will come in, right? And then it just kind of like obviously has a pressure. And of course men have their own paradigms as well, right? Like, she doesn't care, she doesn't look after me, she doesn't do this, all this usual kind of paradigm stuff. So I think it's really, really important to kind of see where you are, see what's needed, and then take it from there. But definitely I think that we should all have a level of self-care, self-love, self-respect, self-esteem. I think it's something that is actually really, really important, right? But I would say be careful of the rules around it. Be careful of the rules around it, because what happens is that the rules around things are built on your paradigm as well. So for example, let's say that I've been brought up my whole life watching Disney movies, okay? Now, if I've been watching Disney movies my whole life, what will happen is when I grow up, I will start to think that the way I'm supposed to get married, for example, is that I'm supposed to meet someone who is not from my own kind and very different to me and this and that, meet them in a very random setting. And, over some time, that person will develop to be the person that I fall in love with and I will marry, right? And people around me are going to resist it and they're going to resist it and they're going to be against it. But eventually I will kind of, just get on with it and get over it. Everything, it'll be fine. Everything will work out, And so this paradigm is a direct response to me watching Disney movies my whole life. So in the same way, like, if we don't have that right level of self-care, self-love, self-esteem, all these kind of things, it will be affected as well, because you will have certain rules for things. And this is the main point, right? Like, whose rules apply? Like, how sometimes, like, especially myself, like, I used to watch TV programs as a child, and in the TV programs you would see like typical white parents saying to their kids, "Oh, I love you, son." Right? And then like us who live in Asian households or African or like these kind of different households, like our parents don't come to us every day and say, "Oh, son, I really love you," and daughter, I really love you, and all this stuff, which is kind of weird now, because I see my parents speaking like that to my kids. I'm like, why didn't you speak to me like that when I was a kid, right? But like what happens is that our minds go, "Oh, look, this rule is that if my parents love me, like the TV programs I'm watching, they will say, 'I love you, son.' So the rule is that if your parents say, 'I love you, son,' that means they love you. And if they don't fulfill that rule, that means they don't love you, right? And this is what I'm saying. So now what we can do is either I can go to my mom and dad and say, 'Mom, Dad, look, you need to tell me every single morning that you love me,' right? So that I can feel good." So we can either change the circumstance or we can change the rule. Or I can go to myself, "You know what? Every time my dad buys me groceries, that means he loves me," right? So you see, there's two ways now, right? Either we change the situation, the circumstance, by going to mom, dad, saying, "Mom, Dad, you must tell me this, you must do this every day." Or we change the rules and we say, no, just because they don't say they don't love me, that is not it. If my mom makes me biryani, that means she loves me. If my dad buys groceries for us, that means he loves me. If my dad goes to work, it means he loves me. Like, you see the difference, right? Like, imagine your parents don't tell you they love you, or they don't, or your husband doesn't tell you he loves you, whatever it is, right? But you change the rules to make it easy to win. And this is one of the bad things human beings do. We make it hard to win, right? So many people I worked with in terms of coaching and stuff. And one of the things, one of the typical type of people I work with are those people that don't feel successful. They don't feel successful, right? And when I sit down with them and I'm like, "Okay, tell me, what have you done?" And they're like, "I've done this, I've done this, I've done that." And they've done all this stuff. And I'm like, "You still don't feel successful?" They're like, "No." And the truth is because they've never set goalposts, or they've never set rules that they can actually meet. They set rules which are impossible. And today it's like, if you look at social media is actually a very dangerous thing from that perspective, because a lot of the people nowadays are growing up with that whole comparing mindset, right? So they're looking at, like, imagine me right now, yeah? Like, if I'm looking at someone my age, I'm like, "Oh, I don't know, this guy's my age and he's like a billionaire and he's got this many cars and he's got this." Imagine I start comparing myself with that, right? But for today's young people, it's even worse. Why? Because they've been comparing themselves when they were 11, when they were 12, when they were 13, when they're 14, and they're constantly seeing this stuff, right? So when you do that to yourself, you will find that it will have a massive impact on you. So what I'm saying is that you make the rules harder. So what happens is I'm on TikTok and I see that, just like I'm a 15-year-old girl, there's another 15-year-old girl on TikTok, and she's got like 4 million followers on TikTok. And I'm like, I got no followers. And everyone's telling her, "Oh, I love you, and you're so amazing, and you're great, and this and this and this." And I'm like, no one loves me. And it's like, if someone really loved me, then I would have 1 million followers. And if I was a really great person, I would have to have 1 million followers on TikTok. That would mean that I'm a good person. That means I'm worthy. That means I'm worthy of respect and love and all this stuff, right? So now the rules and the boundaries we've set are like crazy boundaries, right? And I'm like, if you could set your own rules, wouldn't you set easy rules for yourself? Like, imagine if I was going to do an exam today, right? It's like, what rules would I set for my exam? I'll be like, "Okay, just write your name, write the date on top, and you pass with flying colors." Like, that's the rules I want to set for myself. So in the same way, I would really, really advise that, yes, self-care and self-love and self-esteem, all this, but I wouldn't judge it by the non-Muslim standards, and I wouldn't judge it by their rules. I would actually sit down, I would make up my own rules. Right? And how do you do that? You can actually look at specific things. Like, even if you think about like a friend who's there, like if a friend said they were really stressed and they're really this and that, like, what kind of advice would you give them? What should they do? Like, even simple things like taking a walk alone without your phone, having a nice bath or a shower, or like whatever it is. I would say, like, rather than it being a thinking thing where you're just thinking, like, plan out activities and things where you kind of give to yourself. Right? So you could just give yourself a walk in a nice park. You could just give yourself, like, I'll give you an example. Tomorrow, like today, I'm going to be exhausted when everything's all said and done, right? Tomorrow, Thursday, Mr. Grumpy, that's me, right? So tomorrow, I'm just going to spend some time self-care, self-love, self-esteem, go to a nice coffee shop, have nice food, relax. Gonna do a bit of work. I've got some work planned and everything, but just a very, very different day because look, I've been full out today. I've been full out with the family over the last couple of days. I've been here for you guys. Like, I deserve for me to have a rest. I deserve for me to take a break, and I deserve for me to recuperate so I can give the best of myself to you and everyone else. So in the same way, this is what I'm saying, that start thinking about things you could do on a weekly. Like, literally, I would sit down and I'll be like, okay, what are 2 or 3 things that I could do practically in my week for self-love, self-care, and all this kind of stuff? Because once you do this and then you actually follow through and do this stuff, you will start to feel better. You will find that and by the way, this is not something that you will find that you feel better over like 5-6 weeks later. If you pick the habits right now, even little things that you want to do, you will find that immediately after you do it, you will feel better. So for example, one of the things we were saying to Sister Asil last week was that, like, you should definitely go and you should do some meditation. So if you actually give yourself the time and you sit down and you meditate for 10 minutes, right, you will actually feel better about yourself. And so what happens is self-esteem, self-care, self-worth, self-love, all that stuff, it goes up because you did an activity for yourself. And the same thing, like I said, if you have a really nice bath, or if you have a really nice shower, or if you go to a really nice park, or if you go for a walk, or if you eat something you really like, or you drink something, or you give something, like all of these things, they will actually take all of those self-worth, self things to a much higher level. So I would say, like, along with changing the rules and all this stuff, I would say, like, really look at... Yeah, think about it. And maybe some of the other brothers and sisters can kind of chime in as well, right? Like, how would you kind of, like, give to yourself? How do you kind of, give yourself time, and so that you can increase your self-worth, self-esteem, and all of these things? And this is what I'm saying, that I feel that just when you get into that mindset of giving to yourself, what that does is it actually psychologically says to yourself, oh, I'm giving to him because he's worthy of giving, right? Or I'm giving to her because she's worthy of giving and she deserves to be given and she's good enough to be given, right? So I think that this is what I'm saying, that practically I would definitely advise that you do things for yourself, and you have to give yourself time. And alhamdulillah, like, you've got all the life to come, inshallah, with being married and all this stuff. But especially when you get married, and this is why a lot of the time I say to my wife, I'm like, look, just leave us and go out. Like, go out. Take your camera, go for a walk, take some pictures, go out for the day, go with your friends, like, do something where you're not with us, right? Because especially for a mother, it's very difficult because a mother is constantly on, right? She's fully on and she's always doing stuff and it's always for everyone else. And a lot of mothers, a lot of wives, they can feel like that, right? Like, it's just like you're just living for everyone else. And so it's really important. That's why I always say to my wife, like, go out and spend time and do something for yourself. And in the same way, I would say that you guys should definitely think of those kind of things as well, where you are actually doing stuff which, benefits you, makes you feel good, makes you feel do things. It could be anything. Like I said, it could be going to the spa, it could be getting a massage, it could be, meeting a friend, it could be going for dinner, whatever it is. But I would say plan something in every week. And it could actually be a fun thing you do every week where you sit down and you go, right, this week, what am I doing to make myself feel really good and give to myself, right? And then I would advise, obviously, like, do the other side of that, right? Where you actually do work hard and you do all the other things that you're supposed to do and stuff. And then this is more of a reward rather than it just being like, I just chill and have a good time all the time. Although I do feel like that. I spent, my wife was saying to me today, we've done 3 malls in 3 days. And she's like, I hate malls, like shopping malls. She hates malls. She really hates malls, right? Shopping centers and all this stuff. And so she's like, we just spent 3 days in 3 malls and I don't want it. So definitely make sure that, there's a balance between these things. But yeah, I think you should plan something and you should come back and tell us next week that, hey, you know what, this is what I did and this is what I thought.